There we go. Alrighty, everyone. So welcome back to Unit 5. I hope you guys had fun playing around with Twitter, and hopefully you learned a lot on how to use the APIs that they have available for you guys. I know that some students have a plan to use it for the UCI hacks and making a Twitter bot so that it can automatically delete like unwanted tweets. Because you know how when you're a middle schooler, you're like posting all these random tweets, stuff that you don't want people to see in the future, right? So that's what one of the projects that they thought about for UCI hacks, a middle school chatbot deleter. So it deletes all those very embarrassing tweets that you would post back in the days. And I thought it was pretty cool to share with you guys, just to give you like ideas of what kind of projects people are thinking about, as well as how to use what you already know so far. But in this week, we're going to be building our own Instagram from scratch. So in order to do that, we're going to be learning how to use Parse and MongoDB, as well as Heroku's platform. Heroku is just a platform that allows you to host your application using their servers. And as they also provide the tools like MongoDB add-ons so that you can implement your database through MongoDB, and Parse, which is basically a way of communicating MongoDB with your server, how to implement both. It's like the middleman. So let's get started. As you already know, we got our walkthrough videos. We've updated them as well for this week. So you'll have more content. The videos are long, so I do recommend doing at least one every day because there's going to be like 14-minute videos, some that are 20-minute videos. There's at least 2 that are 20 minutes long. So imagine if you screw up one thing on one of those simple videos, it's over. Everything is going to crash. So you got to start up really early for this one. And we updated them so that they are capable with handling the newest Swift language. So, but I'll still be able to help you guys out with the logic because most of it is pretty still much the same as the other Swift language. And don't forget to submit your projects, simple stuff. The deadline is this Sunday midnight, but I was thinking of giving you guys an extension since we have this Monday upcoming off. I'm not sure, but I'll see depending on how I feel, if I want to make you guys suffer. And I like how you guys have been using the discussion system. You guys have been doing great. I know that sometimes there aren't not answers that really were very helpful. Like yesterday, there was a student that came up with me in a issue that was going on with the button. It crashed every time he pressed the like button on his Twitter app. So, but if every time that your app crashes because of a button that you tap on or a segue, look at the storyboard because you'll find the errors there, and you'll see I'll show you where to find it on Xcode, but it's a tab where you click on the button, and on the, you know how you have 2 windows, right? The files, and on the other one you have like attributes and all that. On the very last one, there's an option that says Connections Inspector. You look at which button is connected to what outlet. Because I know that sometimes you might mess up and you redo it, you put Command Z, but the outlets are still there. Those don't get deleted. So you have to like redo them, and it's a whole bunch complex process. I'll show you how to do that. But yeah, the whole point was that the discussion might not tell you specifically how to do that because it's a lot of images. You can't just tell you like, oh, go to this and that and that. It's not just simple code to text you. So anyhow, attendance. The code for this week is Parse. So make sure you guys go to check your email and go and check your attendance so that I can mark you all down. And if you already did, then awesome. But I'll keep this up for like a couple more seconds. Question?
So how is the structure of this class going to be different because of we're on a quarter system? So like looks like the usual iOS CodePath course is a bit longer, but the quarter is ending in like a few weeks. So like how is what's going to be different than what we saw on the website?
So from here to week 6 is the same. I mean unit 6. What's different afterwards is all the other units, we're just going to mash them up in twos. We're going to go through 2 units each week. Because most of the other units, they don't cover more material anymore. It's more like me helping you guys plan out your iOS app design, the prototype, and how are you going to code it, how are you going to go about it, and if it's doable. And so essentially, you guys will have less time to work on your project compared to semester schools. That's the only difference. They have more time, but I thought that it would be the same. Like you guys will have a break anyways, so you guys can, if you want to keep working on it and even publish it to the Apple Store, I can show you guys that too. Towards the end of the weeks, I'll show you guys how to publish an app on the Apple Store. You will need an account, but I will show you how to. If you already have one, I can show you what steps you need to push it and deploy it to the Apple App Store. That's one of the things that we'll go through it towards the end. So after week 7, it's basically you guys weeks 8, 9, 10. You're just going to be working on your iOS app project with your group. Is that clear your question? Cool. And all right, yeah, everybody got attendance. So do you guys have any questions regarding today? So today we're going to be learning. I'll show you how to use the basics of Parse. You guys are going to be building your own chat messenger application in iOS, and we're going to be using Parse to talk with the server. And I'll have you guys implement the code and everything, and we'll see how we ended up working on it. Any other questions? Cool. Let's get some coding. Oh, and before we get started on the coding stuff, I want to make an announcement. I have successfully obtained the website from UCI, so they gave us a website. I think you guys read this on the email, but I just wanted to show you because it looks cool. So if you go to clubs.uci.codepath, I made a simple website for you guys, so I don't have to tell you where that. You know how I email you with the link of YouTube that shows you where the video is? You can just go to the website and it'll automatically show you the most recent lecture video. So you can bookmark this. It's in clubs.uci.edu//codepath. And you can check out the other videos that are there. And if you click on it, it'll take you straight to that video that you want to watch. I'll put more resources up here because I know that the course portal from CodePath doesn't contain all the resources that we're using and that I've been giving you. So I'm going to put more links on this website and resources that can help you out with what we've been learning so far so that you can use it towards your project that you'll be working on. Cool. So now that we have that set up, I know you guys, I sent you guys an email yesterday, and make sure to download and unzip the Parse Starter project because today we're going to be working on that project. So open up Xcode and unzip the file that I sent you through email and open up Chatterbox or the Parse Starter project. We're going to be working on that. There we go. I'll give you a couple seconds to open it up and have it ready. And essentially what we're going to be working on today is, let me make this smaller. Come on. There we go. You're going to be, I'll show you guys how to create your own Parse chat, or it's a messaging application. So this is what it does. You're going to create and implement a user authentication so that it logs in through the server. So it's no longer going to be, there's no hard code users in it. It'll actually talk to the server. And once you're able to log in, your app should retrieve messages from the server and be able to post it, send it to the server, and retrieve messages that were sent. In this case, I created other users like memo, other memo, and the new memo. And you should be able to text back to the group that you're in. There you go. So now if I log out, and if let's say that I create another account called Michael, and I sign up, or if I try logging in, let's see what happens. Okay, cool. So your app will also be able to handle errors. For example, in case that a user doesn't exist or it's the wrong password, it'll notify you. And we'll also be able to create new users. Cool. So we created our user, and as you can see, it loaded the same chat that we were in back then. Now let's try to send a message from Michael. Nice. So if I go back and log into using Memo, I should be seeing that message too from Michael. There you go. There it is. So everything is on the server. We're no longer going to be implementing hard code into our apps. So this is the first step towards doing full stack applications, or I mean the last step, which is implementing the backend. Cool. So now that you guys know what we're going to be doing, let's go ahead and implement that into our own projects starters. So the very first step, let me whip out my stickies because I need to remember the steps. Alright. First step. So if you go to your storyboard, we know we have a couple things going on here. We got our login view controller. And then we have a navigation controller that takes us to the chat view controller. So the first step for any application that you're building is building the user and the user authentication. So let's go ahead and implement the login sign up function. So if you go to your app delegate, let's start with the first step. So every time that you set up anything, which is turning on a computer or turning on your phone, you got to load up the basics, right? You got to load up the screen, you got to load up the memory, the RAM, all that good stuff. Same thing when you're making your applications. If you're making an application that talks to a server, you got to start up the server. So you got to talk to it. So we're going to go ahead and initialize that server using parse. I'm using parse from CocoaPods that I installed it, and we're going to use their libraries to use parse methods. So we're going to initialize the server right now. And to do that, you call the parse initialize with parse client configuration, and then you're going to have a closure inside that's called block, and in here it's going to be the configuration, which is going to be a parse mutable client configuration. So now that you have the method and the closure within it, we need to pass in we have our configuration object, and using that configuration object, we have to initialize parse. In order to do that, we need to know which server we're talking to. So we're going to need the address and the ID of our server in order to authenticate that we're using the correct server. So we're going to call configuration.application ID, and we're going to be using parse, the server that CodePath created for us. So we're going to use CodePath/parse. That is the application ID for the server from CodePath that they're providing for us. Whoops. And now we need to give it the address. So where is our server located? Which is going to be, it's going to be a URL, which is http://45.79.67.127:1337. Cool. So now we have just initialized our server. It knows which server we want to use and the address where it's located, specifically in the internet. So now that we have our server going, now we can start implementing the user login and sign up. But make sure you guys have this. Everyone has it now? Awesome. Question?
So this means you're getting permission to use the server?
We're not getting permission, we're just connecting to it. In order to connect to it, since it's a public parse server, anyone can access it. But when you create your own in Instagram, you're going to have a client key ID so that no one can access it unless you have the client key. But for now, since this is parse allows you to create multiple types of servers, either public or private. For in this case, we're using a public server. Question?
And you said we're not using the public server, we'll have a dot.
For Instagram, you're gonna, so aside from this, you're gonna have a configuration dot, I don't think it'll show here, but it'll have something like the client key. You'll be using your key, which is only provided to you. No one else can use it. But if it's a public one, you don't need the key since it's public. So now we can go ahead and implement the, let me delete that breakpoint. Oops. There you go. Now we're going to go to our login view controller and start implementing the logic. Whoops, I already have it. Let me take that out. There you go. Alright. So we have to first create the sign up functionality, because when we have a user, we want to be able to create a new user, since we'll be creating a completely new chat where there's no users at all. So in order to do that, let me just go to mine also over here. There you go. So first, if you go back to your main storyboard, you'll notice that you have a couple things going on here. You have a username label, text label, and a password text field as well. And we're going to retrieve those inputs, and using the text from the username and the password text fields, we have to convert them into a string and use those to create our user, right? So we have to first check, obviously, that the inputs are not empty. Luckily, I already created that a function for you guys that checks everything for you right here. It's a simple function that just checks that the text fields are not empty. So all we have to do is implement that function with a simple if statement. So if username and password not empty, then we create the user. So in order to create a user, we're going to use parse's library to create a parse object, which in this case is going to be a parse user object. So we're going to call our new user equal to pf user. So here we're creating an instance of a parse user object. And now the new user needs its properties. And username. So we're going to give the new user a username, which is going to be equal to the username text field dot text, and it's gonna, the user also needs a password, which is going to be the username text field dot password text field dot text. Cool. Question?
The dot text attribute from those text fields, are they already string?
No. So if you do this, you're passing in.
Oh no. The dot text.
Oh, the dot text is how you retrieve the string from it. That was.
If someone puts in like a number, the dot text.
It'll convert it to a string. Yeah.
It will always return a string.
So if you wanted to actually have a int, then you would call the int inside it as a method. That's how you convert a string to an int. Oh, it's giving me an error. Something like that. Or I think it's .int. No, never mind. But yeah, you have to convert it first to a string. No matter what, it's always going to be converted to a string. Then you have to do whatever you want to do with it. So we have the username and password string from the text fields. Now we have the necessary resources to create a user. So let's call the method that will actually create that user. It will be new user dot sign up in background, and just click on the second option and make sure you delete those brackets. And it's gonna this method sign up in background takes a parameter, a function as a parameter. So we need to create our own function within this method. And we know that this method will either have a success, which is a bool, or an error, which can be an error. So now we need to check if we get an error, then tell the user, hey, there was something wrong getting the user. If not, then we create the user. So first let's check that if we got an error. And make sure it's in the, and we also want to display the user a sign up error, which takes in an error. So this method right here, it's nothing fancy. It's something that I created down here. What it does is it gives you an alert controller. So you guys saw when I created a sign up, it told me, hey, there's no user called Michael. So that's what a UI alert controller is. So I'm just calling that function to present me that. Else, then we're going to print the user created. Registered. Cool. And then, if we were able to create the user, we want to segue and go towards the chat view, right? Because if we just create the user, then we'll still be, it will get stuck on the login view controller. So we need to tell our application, hey, go to the chat controller now. So we're going to do a perform segue. With identifier. And we're going to use segues.authenticating. And for the sender, it's going to be nil. So the segues authenticated, it's basically a string. But what I did is I created a constant file that will show, instead of typing the string over and over again, I can just have the autocomplete do it for me by creating constants. And I created a segues.authenticated. That way, if this is how you prevent errors with working with databases, because strings, Swift will never let you know if there's a typo or not. It'll just, because it's a string, they don't care about strings. So the purpose of creating constants in your projects is so that you don't have any spelling mistakes when it comes to segues or server names. Cool. So now that we have our sign up functionality, we can do the same thing for the on login functionality as well. So it's going to be pretty straightforward. The only different thing is that we're going to take in the user text field and the user and the password text field, and we're going to call a different method that will actually, instead of signing up, it will log them in. So same stuff, is your username and password not empty, then we get the username string dot text is equal to the whatever that we get, and the password as well. Cool. Now we're going to call the method from parse to log in the user. Oops. Log in with username. So in here, what we're taking in, it's taking the username as a parameter. So we're going to give it the username and the password. And I need to make sure that these are force unwrapped. On the other ones, I did a different type of unwrapping, but since we're already checking that they're not empty, it's fine to force unwrap them. So now that we have this, now we need to give it a closure, a method that will actually complete the user login, which is going to return either an error or an actual user. So same thing as before. If we get an error, then we just print the error. And if we present the error saying to the user saying that there was something wrong going. Display login error. Cool. So nothing different as the steps from above. And same with here, we're going to print the successful login. And we're going to perform the segue as before. In this case, it's going to be question.
So the self.perform segue, you just know that it's going to do the segue that doesn't.
It's going to perform.
It's possible to have two segues.
Yeah.
So
That's why you have identifiers,
Oh, got it.
so that it knows where to go, to which one. In this case, I'm using the segues.authenticated. But you can create more. Yeah. Cool. Now, what's going on? Oh, yeah. There you go. Now I don't have any errors here. Oh. There we go. Now it's fine. I know we still have some errors, but that's because of something else. So now we have our login and sign up functionality. So if we try to run our app, it won't work because I still have some errors going on. We need to retrieve the messages before we can actually do the retrieve them and display them in our table view. So in order to fix that issue, let's go ahead and go into our chat view controller. Because now we were able to implement the sign up and the login functionality. So now that we were able to sign up and log in, now we need to configure the messages that are being retrieved and also allow the user to send messages to the server. So let's go back to our chat view controller. And this is where we're going, I think it should be empty for you guys. So first, as any other table view needs, all table views require an array of anything, which are going to be displayed on the table view. In this case, we're going to create an array for messages. And that array is going to be a type of PF object. And we're going to initialize it by creating an empty array. So this is where we're going to store the messages that are going to be retrieved by the server. And now that we have our array, we also need to tell our application what kind of object is going to be stored in this array. In this case, it's going to be a chat message, which is equal to a PF object, class name, message. So in here we're retrieving the type of object, which is a type of message. As you can recall, we made classes last week, but in here the class is built through CodePath servers. So they already made it for us. Now we're just going to retrieve it from their server. Now that we have our arrays, we have to construct the message functionality. So first we're going to be able to retrieve messages. So as any other, when you go on Google and you type something up, that's what you guys call a query. So in here we're going to construct our query to retrieve messages from the server. So let's create our query, and we're going to use parse's functionality method called PF query, and it's going to retrieve all the. It's going to retrieve a class name. In this case, this is where we're going to implement the chat room, or you know how you guys have group chats and you give them names. This is essentially the group chat that we're going to be working on with, and we're going to call it CodePath UCI CodePath. And let's call it CodePath 2 because the other class made it already, but I want to see how you guys are able to implement yours. Now we're going to, once we retrieve the messages, we want them to be displayed in a different order. So on your phone, if you go in your normal messages, it's actually being retrieved in ascending order. So it's the most recent and to the oldest. But since our message is being, the most recent is being displayed on the top, we're going to do it in descending order, starting from the most recent on top, going down to the bottom. So in order to do that, good thing you don't have to, the best thing about parse is that they already have their own sorting methods. In this case, it allows us to sort it in ascending order and descending order. But in our case, we're going to query it based on the descending order. And the key is, as you all know, the date that it was sent, which is going to be created at. The created at is just an attribute from a chat message. Chat message has an ID of the user, the username, and as well as the message and the date that the message was sent at. So we're sorting it based on the date that it was sent. And we don't want our app to crash, so we only want to get only 20 messages. And we also want to display who sent that message. So we're going to include key user. This is how we know that who sent the message, by calling, making sure that when we retrieve the messages, it also retrieves the username. And now we do the final method, which is actually calling the query, which is going to be find objects in background, which is going to be a closure, and it's going to return either the messages or an error. So you're going to do an if let messages equal messages. This is just saying, hey, if we retrieve messages, because messages can be nil. So here we're just checking that messages is not nil. Then all we're going to do is we're going to make our self.messages array that we created previously, this one. And we're going to set it equal to the array of messages that we get from our query. And what do you do after you obtain any items? As you recall from your Flix and your Tumblr applications, reload the table. Whoops. Table view dot reload data. There you go. Else, if we don't get any messages, then we're just going to print the error. And make sure to force unwrap it. Cool. So now that we're able to retrieve messages, let's set up the functionality to send messages. So let's go down to our functionality that says onSend. And we're going to do something similar above. So first, let's check that if you recall from the message storyboard, we have a text field. Let's make sure that the user input is not empty. The message is not empty. So if message text field dot text is empty equals false, all we're saying here is if the message is not empty. Then we're going to send the message. We're going to create our chat message object, calling using parse, class name, and it's going to be the same one. We need to specify to which group chat we're sending this to. In this case, it's going to be UCI code path 2. And then now we need to fill up the attributes of our chat message. So each chat message has the text or the body of the message, which is equal to the message text field dot text. And it also needs to know who sent that message. So we need to pass in the parameter for the user, which is going to be the pf user dot current. This method right here, it accesses the current user who is logged in into your application. So that way it knows who sent that message. And now we need to call the method to actually send it to the server. So if all of these things are okay, then we're going to save that message in our server. Save in background. And the server is either going to respond with a success or an error message. So we need to check if we received an error. If we got an error, then we'll just tell the user message could not be sent. Else, then if we were able to send the message, then all we would like to do is reset the text field. So delete the text that was inputted so that we can have a fresh new message being able to be input. So we're going to reset the text field by calling the self.messages text field dot text equals to empty. There you go. So this way, if it was successful, then it'll just remove the text that was sent. That way, it's like a good way of UI to show the user that the message was sent. No need to put a notification that says, oh, sent, because messaging, it's constant. Oh. Pretty much that's it. Yeah. There you go. So now that we have everything set up, let's try it out. Let's see if this works. So run your application. And let's see our own chat message come to life. Cool. So nothing wrong so far. Let's try to sign up someone. I'll sign up myself. I'm going to click on sign up. Account already exists. Really? On this one? UCI code path 2. Huh, I guess so. There we go. So there's nothing, right? Because we're in a chat. Our group chat is called UCI code path 2. So I'm going to try to send a message. Cool. Nice. It worked. So far I was able to send a message to the group class. Question?
Maybe do when error is nil.
When error is nil?
Yeah, because on set.
Here?
You create like a function.
Yeah.
Like success. And you give an error. It's like after it finishes, it's going to return either success or error.
Yeah. So we're checking to make our code shorter. We just check if we got an error. Because if we did,
Let error equal.
why didn't I do that? because in this one it's always gonna send me either or, like it has to. Whereas when we created a user, you know how we did the if let error equals error? It's because the, what is it called? This method, the login with username, you can see that it's an optional, right? So this means that it doesn't know what kind of error it's going to give you. It might be a network error, it might be a invalid credentials error, it might be a invalid password or invalid username, all kinds of error. So we don't know specifically what kind of error it's going to be. Whereas the onsend, it's always going to give you one error message, and it's just going to tell you, oh, the message wasn't sent. So it knows for sure what message it's going to give you as an error. Yeah. And same with the success. If it succeeds, then it'll just send the message to the server. Were you guys able to text to the group chat? Yeah? Did you send something to the server? No? Network connection error?
Some of my outlets aren't connected, so I gotta check that.
The outlets?
Yeah,
What?
yeah. When I download it, I saw it.
What kind of error is it giving you for the network?
It's because they're not connected. The outlets.
Really? Are you guys getting all that error? The same error? No?
I could see it,
Let me see real quick. Which outlets is it? Oh yeah, sometimes it doesn't show, but if you're able to run it,
so compile it.
yeah.
Check in this. What?
Yeah, it was pretty weird. Mine wasn't good.
Yeah, when you compile, it should be fine. If it doesn't give you any errors here, then that means the outlets are okay. It'll probably give you an error because of the network connection failed. Oh. Okay. I see. It's the NS. Let me stop it. Okay. So if you guys, are you guys, who else is getting the network error?
I'm not, but I'm not seeing anything.
You didn't send it? Did you type all capital case UCI footprint?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, all cap on UCI. For you, it should be because it would be transport security policy. So you can just go to the info list. I'll show you. So if you guys are getting a network error, that's probably because of the info list file. You can find it here on the supporting files, info list. And there should be what was the error again? Can you repeat it to me? What it would say? A little bit before that. Something about app transport security. And for the rest of you, make sure that the group chat is, you spelled it like this. UCI code path 2.
It might be the numbers, no?
Which numbers?
Like TPP,
The what?
the URL link to, because it says, because I'm also doing the error, but it's like the error has occurred and there's a secure connection to the server. So,
No, I know which error it is. It's because you guys need to set up your Xcode to allow connections from other servers. Yeah, has blocked Xcode. So you guys would have to do this on your NS right here. So you go on your info list and you add a new one. You go here, click on the add button right here, and this one, it should be, what is it? app transport security settings. Yeah. And then you click on this one and you click on the add button on it. And you add a category, and the category is going to be allow arbitrary downloads. Allow where is it? NS allow arbitrary downloads. Let me delete this one. There we go. Allow arbitrary loads. And you set this equal to yes. And you also add the, oh, that's it. Just make sure it's set to yes. And then try running it. If not, it might be due to your system preferences of your own computer. If you have a firewall or like anything that's blocking random URLs, it's gonna give you errors with Xcode. But if not, that should have fixed it, and you should be able to sign in again. There we go. Strong was able to do it. Nice. And just make sure that the, oops. Make sure that you're using this class name on the retrieve messages and on send. The UCI code path 2. Everybody else getting errors or everything's good on their machine? Did it just work now? Or still?
Mine works,
Yeah? Awesome. Yeah, there you go. Derek is on the party as well. Nice. Cool. So now we're gonna go over something else. So if you noticed that if we exit from our application, and I go back to my Chatterbox app, you'll notice that it took me back to the login system, the login page. But if you were on another app like Facebook or WhatsApp or anything, it'll take you to your account, right? That's called user persistence. So let's try to add some user persistence to our own app so that it doesn't ask for me to log in every time that I exit the application. In order to do that, we're going to create an event listener. Oh no, not there. Right here. You're going to create a simple if statement which checks if there's already a user logged in. All you do is you go to your app delegate and you'll see a little comment on there that says check if user is logged in. And let's add that if statement. If PAuser.current is not nil, then we're going to tell our storyboard to take us to the chat view controller. That way we don't have to log in again. So here we're going to call our storyboard and we're going to access the main page. And bundle is nil. So now we know which page we want to go to if there's already a user logged in. Now we force our application to go to that view controller. You're going to call window dot root view controller equals storyboard dot instantiate. This is the second option, instantiate view controller with identifier. And for that, you're going to use a constant view controllers dot chat page. There you go. Window represents the current window of your application that it is in, and we're just setting the root view controller, or in other words, the main page that you want to be on. Set it equal to the chat page. And that's how you create user persistence. Let's try running our app. Cool. So I launched it and it didn't even ask me to log in. It went straight into the application. Let me close the application and see if it actually does work. I'm going to go ahead and close it. And let's see. Nice. It didn't even ask me to log in anymore. And that's how you do user persistence with parse. And lastly, we got to implement our logout functionality because it doesn't work. So when you're creating a logout button, you want to create what's called a event listener. An event listener, all it does is that it sits there and waits until it gets called on. So let's create that guy who's just going to sit there and wait for it to get called whenever we want it to. And this is the last thing that you will be learning for today. It's notification center dot default dot add observer. I misspelled it. Add observer, and we're going to give it the name to be a notification dot name did logout. The object is going to be nil, and the queue, which is a operation queue. And I'll explain what all of these do in a bit. Notification in. Oops. There we go. Self.logout. Alright. So what we're doing here is we're using Apple's notification center services to add an event listener. So this is how if you guys receive messages, even though your app is not running, that's why you use observers for. So if you look at your app delegate, you'll notice that there's also application will resign, application did enter background. So if you read all of these are basically telling, this allows you to tell your app what to do when it's in background, when it's in foreground, when it becomes active, and when it's terminated. Typically the notifications are added on the terminate. So when your application is terminated, you want to add the notifications listener so that if you receive a message, it'll bypass all your settings and notify you, hey, you got a message from Michael. And that's what event listeners are for. But in this case, we're going to add a notification observer when the application is running so that it knows when to log out. And all we're doing is we added an observer with the name of did logout, and it doesn't have anything. It's literally, that's why the object is nil, and the queue is saying when to perform that action, and we want it to be done at the main. It has to be the first thing that you do as soon as it gets called on. And the notification that is going to be done or performed is logout. This logout function is from the parse. So there's nothing, oh wait, actually, no, sorry. There's a function that I created for you, which is already here. It calls this function right here on your application main. So this will do all the logging back. All it does is same thing as the other functions. It either returns you an error or successful. And if it's successful, all we're doing is we change the storyboard back to the login page. It'll take you back to the login page. And this is how you do it. Cool. So now that we added the notification center, the event listener, now we just add it to our chat view controller. This is the last step for today's class. So on logout, if you go back to your chat view controller, all you have to do is notification center.default.post, and this is what notification you're going to send it. Did logout. Object no. There you go. This is how you do it. So what we're doing here is we're telling our notification center to send a did logout message saying, hey, this was what happened. The user clicked on the logout button. And your app delegate is going to respond and say, oh shoot, all right, I'll log out the user. And that's it. Nothing too complicated. And let's see if everything works now. Let's see if we have a fully functional application that can log in, send messages, retrieve messages, and log out the user. So we're in the last one, so let's click logout. Perfect. And it took us back to the login page. That's it for today, guys. If you guys want to do bonuses, because I know it's midterms week, so I know you got to study and everything. But if you want to add some like cool, like let me show you. Let's say that you wanted to add like a picture, like on Facebook. Every time someone sends a message, it shows like their picture. I added some of the code already there in comments. All you have to do is add the UI image into your cell and create the outlet, and then you just call it here. And it should add a little adorable image every time that someone sends a message.
You created the listening. How exactly do you add after add observer? So like you add notifications in the
Where?
in
On the app delegate?
correct.
Here?
What are we
Nothing. We're creating an observer called did logout. That's all it's doing. And on the app delegate, what's happening here is if this guy is called out, did logout, then we perform this operation right here. That's all it's doing. But if you want to go specifics, we're creating an observer for name. And here we're just, you can't just give it a string. You have to convert it to an object called notification.name. But essentially it's just a string. So whenever this is called, we're going to perform the following operation, self.logout, which is a function that I created over here at the bottom for you guys.
Then what's object?
The object, nothing. That's for, so let's say that you were, you got an email and you want to display it on your notification bar. You got to give it that object, right? That email object, which is going to contain the subject and the body. So every time you receive, if we were developing a notification for an email, then here we would pass an email object. And then we just notify the user, like do the self.notify user. And it'll create the little UI view and everything for when you see, every time you see a notification pop up. Boom. You gotta create everything as you do in the storyboard, you gotta do the same thing for a notification. You gotta set the constraints, you gotta know how big you want the bubble to be, you gotta tell it if it's gonna be the ones that block everything that you're doing, or if it's just gonna slide through at the top, or if you don't want it to be shown, but it'll show you on the notification center. Or if you want to add a button that expands the message, so that you can see the whole thing. Or you know how when you slide right and it says clear, the notification, if you want to add that, or a response, if you want to respond it within there, if you don't want to go to the app, you can add all sorts of things to it. But here, all we're doing is we're just creating an event listener. So it's like if we had imagine that we had like a team of people that make burgers. You have your people that are the chefs, right? But they're just gonna sit there and wait for a call until you tell them, hey, make me a burger. Then they're gonna start working. Same thing here. We're creating a worker that's just waiting for it to be called on. In this case, the guy's name is called did_logout. And every time that we press the onLogout button, all it's doing is calling that guy to hey, start working, do your thing.
And then let's notify users.
Which
After
one?
log out, you also be notified after self logout.
Oh no, that was just an example for email.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Does that clear out your question?
How does this apply to the Instagram?
You guys won't be using parse.
Oh, we won't.
No, you will.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was just showing you the basics.
Gotcha.
So in parse, the only difference is that with Instagram is you're gonna be creating your own server. You're gonna creating the user object and the post object, comments object, and you're gonna use parse's functionality to do the exact same thing that you did here.
Okay.
The only difference is that you didn't create the server. The server is already created for us.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Anyone else have questions? Awesome. That's it for today, guys.